So here we are at the Cowanshannock furnace. It's a cut stone cast iron furnace in western Pennsylvania. Really nothing left of this furnace. All the stones have been removed. But we'll try to piece together some of the history and try to figure out what the location of the furnace was. So this is a coal blast furnace, coal blast charcoal furnace. Back in 1845 when this went into blast, that's really the only fuel source that they knew about. They would cut these trees, all the trees that you see all around here would have been cut down, would have been stacked in a teepee position, and then they would have covered everything with dirt, and they would have lit it on fire, and that would have burned the impurities, kind of like the charcoal that we use now for cooking. So one of the things, a couple things you need for a blast furnace. So another thing you need is water. Water would have dammed up on this stream or creek, and it would have been brought down here at some point, and I think we found the path for that. Would have been brought down, and then that would have been used to power a paddle wheel, and that paddle wheel would have blown a bellows. That bellows would have put air into the fire, into the furnace, and that would have heated everything up. So this produced about 2.5 tons of cast iron a day. So another thing you would need would be cast iron, or iron ore. So again, in this portion of Pennsylvania, there's an abundance of iron ore. So these furnaces, about 100 or so furnaces. This is the first furnace that I'm going to video that there's no remains of the furnace, but at least the location is here. I mean, it's a beautiful location. You can look at the stream, look at the falls. I mean, people camp down here. They've kind of dammed it up a little bit, and it's a real nice camping area. But we'll try to piece together what happened. This went out of blast, were abandoned in 1851, so really not sure when it went out of blast. So they say basically maybe because it was in a valley or whatever, but it was not really conducive for cast iron furnace. So again, you need water, which we have a supply. You need to channel that water down through here. You need an abundance of wood. There's plenty of wood around here. Back in the mid-1800s, 1850 or so, you know, this would have been all just clear cut. There would have been nothing here. There's really no houses around, but there would have been an ironmaster house. He was the guy in charge of making sure the right amount of cast iron. Basically, was just in charge of everything. And you know, not just everybody had these furnaces. You had to be a doctor. You had to have some money because these were expensive. I'm thinking like $100,000 to put one of these together, which just, you know, and now is not that much money, but back then, I mean, that would have been a fortune. So not a lot of people could afford to do this. So in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, there were 3 furnaces. I'll try to put in the notes how many furnaces there are here in Armstrong. There's a handful of them. A couple of them are in half decent shape, and some of them, there's just no remains at all. So they would have dammed the water up. That's the first thing they would need. So we'll kind of walk on through here. Again, you just see stones everywhere. We come across this cutout. So what you need is an elevated water source. So they would have run the water down through here. You can see stones, whether these are cut or whether these stones are just placed in here. Kind of difficult to tell after 100 or so years. But you can definitely see the depth. We're probably, you know, 3.5, 4 foot down. The bottom is flat, so they would have just run the water down through here. And really don't see any other signs. This would have been filled up so that the water wouldn't escape back down through. So even though there's no furnace here, there's still a lot of history. Again, you just look at the amount of rocks that they would have had to use. Again, you would have bring a stonemason in. The stonemason would have cut these, squared them off, and they would have started the structure. Because you can just feel the force of that water coming through there. One of the other things that shows just how powerful the water is, how perfect that was cut out. It's almost like that was chiseled. I would expect the water did that. That name's certainly chiseled in there. That's not what we're talking about. This is one of my favorite locations, even though there's no furnace here. It's a nice place to visit. So again, as the water would come down this channel, it's maybe 10 feet higher than what the, probably a little more than that, maybe 12, 10, 15 feet higher. Water would have come down through here. Would expect this area, again, you need a hillside, because what they would do, if the furnace was here, you would build a ramp, and you would bring all the wood and charcoal up to the top, drop it off, drop it inside, and then the furnace would sit someplace in here. When they would basically uncork the furnace or blow the furnace, all the molten cast iron, 1800 degrees or so, would come out. Figure 2.5 tons a day cast iron. So another thing you would need would be iron ore. So this area, they would have had to do some research and find out if there was iron ore. And sorry for the trash. We'll see if we can do a little more digging and try to logically put together where we think the furnace would be. Alright, so here we are up on top of a mound. I can't really tell. I mean, I would expect that this is slag. And that doesn't look natural there. And the rest of the area, it just seems like someone came in and dumped this. So again, when you're doing 2.5 tons of iron ore, which is maybe, 5% of everything that you put in, you're going to have a lot of burnt. You're just going to have all kind of stuff. You're going to have slag, you're going to have popcorn slag with the limestone. That's going to turn almost to a glass. That's really what I'm looking for, some traces of that. So I think this is all man-made. This could be the slag pile. Basically, there was a road down through here, circled up, and they would dump the slag here, because you have to get rid of all that stuff. You couldn't put it in the stream. But they didn't put it in a stream back then. But you see chunks of coal here. Again, I'm looking for slag, I'm looking for cast iron. I see chunks of coal. So the first time I was here a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I remember there being a wheel pit. The wheel pit was, this was a concrete structure where the water wheel would sit, and that would pretty much definitively say where the furnace is. I don't see that anymore. I'm going to keep looking for it. What I will do on occasions is I'll bring my metal detector and I'll see if I can find any chunks of cast iron. I'll do that today. So we'll see if we can find out the location for this furnace. Also see this deep cut. Again, not sure whether this is man-made, but I would think that was what the hillside would have been. Whether they dug this out looking for the iron ore. This is kind of where I remember the wheel pit being. Again, we'll go down a little further and see if we can find it. So this would have been a whole community here. There's really no houses now. Some houses the iron master would have lived in a brick structure, would have been renovated or sold. This apparently was just wood. So there would have been a blacksmith shop, there would have been the iron master, there would have been a general store, would have been a lot of houses, a lot of support. People had to grow food and cook. There were people that would have been cutting the wood and falling trees and things like that. So I mean, it basically employed a community. But some of the pictures I've seen from Penn State, I guess in the 40s or 50s, 1940s or 50s, they actually took pictures, and it was just, you could see the furnace standing like right there at the base of that tree, and there would be no trees. You see nothing. And they basically clear cut everything. So again, this would have operated 24 hours a day, probably not in the winter time, but it would be running 24 hours a day. They would do a pour, they would load it up again with more charcoal, limestone, iron ore, cast iron from before. And once they would have blown the furnace, poured the furnace, they would have had molders down here with ladles. They would have captured the cast iron in a ceramic type ladle, and they would have made like Franklin type cast iron furnaces. pans, frying pans and things like that. So basically all those commodities, when they were done, they would have hauled it out on this road by wagon and horse. And that would have been the cast iron. Cast iron being very brittle, you hit it with a hammer, it'll fracture. So what they would do is they would heat it and beat it in a local blacksmith shop or forge, and they would turn that into wrought iron. Wrought iron would be more usable for plows and tools and knives and anvils and things like that. Alright, so this is what I was looking for. You can see the orange rust on there. That's a piece of cast iron. That's slag from the furnace. Probably not much cast iron in there. That would have been part of the impurities that poured off on the top. I may see what this ridge is here. That's kind of neat. Let me try breaking that. But that looks like a piece of slag. That's something that would have come out of the furnace first, and then after that the cast iron would come out. And we'll just try maybe putting a crack in here to see what this looks like going through the center of it. Alright, so that wraps up this furnace. If you get a chance, you're near Kittanning, near the Cowanshannock Creek, you stop by and take a look at it. Again, beautiful location. I love to camp here. A couple pieces of slag. Again, no definitive proof that there was a furnace, but everything indicates there could have been one. The history book says that it is here. Richard Parks did a lot of work in tracking down all these furnaces. At a website, he passed away, and I'll try to document as more of these as I can as we go along. But I'll put a link in the website for more historical information about this site. Thank you for watching.